They're farming, where they are literally have artists and healers, women that are going around with acupuncture and Reiki and providing counseling to people throughout the island. All of these systems that are being created are almost like out of a chapter from the parable of the sower. You gotta read it to know what I'm talking about. So, and that's our future. And that's our future too. So there's a lot that you can learn from what is happening in Puerto Rico. What I wouldn't advise you to do is what we find a lot of graduate students doing. Graduate students are calling us up and asking, can you hook me up with somebody in Puerto Rico because I got a paper? And I say, no, I can't do that. Literally, the disaster has become an opportunity, a learning opportunity, an opportunity for people who have this vision about wanting to do something incredible, and they want to do it in Puerto Rico. But what I learned while I was there is that the Puerto Ricans on the island, and I wasn't born there, I was born in New York City, right? They have all the answers. They know exactly what they want to do. They've got participatory design projects. They've got all of the answers, and all we need to do is support it. So in response to that, we created a coalition called Our Power PR NYC. You should be getting buttons. I bought about 200 of them. And that coalition is made up of Puerto Rican diaspora folks in New York City who out of, I think what happens with the Puerto Rican diaspora, and I think I can probably speak for some of you here, is that when the hurricane hit Puerto Rico, it was almost like a knife went through our chest. I think we felt like we were going to collapse. We went from this moment of shock and despair to getting up and standing up and saying we need to do everything possible to get Puerto Rico on its feet again. And the outpour of love and support from the Puerto Rican diaspora has been unparalleled. I had an opportunity to talk at the University of Puerto Rico a few weeks ago, and I was there terrified. My hands were shaking. I thought that they were going to reject me the way they rejected the young lords back in the day. And I was ready for that. I was like, no, hell no, this Rico from Brooklyn will not be able to take that. That will take me to therapy. I can't handle that rejection. There were about 2,000 people there. The line was out the door, and the love was unbelievable. They wanted every single Puerto Rican in the United States to know how much everything that you have done for them means to them, how it's made it possible for them to have water, to get attention. When we protest against Promesa here in the United States, because you know that Promesa doesn't always have hearings over there, they'll have them in New York City and Wall Street. When we protest, they hear about it. When we challenge and support the teachers in Puerto Rico because the schools are being privatized the way they were in New Orleans, they hear about it. There is a particular role that we play here that is absolutely necessary for the people in Puerto Rico. It's the kind of role that we played when we were fighting against the bombing of Vieques. It's the same thing, only at a bigger effort. And so it's really important, and I don't know how to say this except that we need to make sure that we move from providing water and providing food to thinking about Puerto Rico de largo plazo, because literally the disaster hasn't even gotten here yet. The disaster is coming. They are not counting the number of people dying. Think about it for a second. They weren't even counting the 1,200 people that were documented. So if 5 years from now you die because you were exposed to all of the chemicals that basically surrounded your home as a result of the hurricane, that doesn't count. If you develop health issues as a result of the stress, or the fact that you didn't get health care, or that you were displaced, or that you didn't get what you needed, that doesn't count. And so they're not going to count the number of deaths as a result of this hurricane. There are people that are not getting housing assistance in Puerto Rico or here in the United States. And there's a forced displacement that is happening in Puerto Rico. They're not getting basic services like education, energy, healthcare. All of that is being privatized. As I mentioned before, foreign companies are being encouraged to come in and invest in dangerous and toxic ways. So the next 6 months can't look like the last 6 months, nor can the next 6 years or the decades. This is a long, long fight. And for us to even think for 1 second that hurricane season is not up upon us and that Puerto Rico is not ready to withstand that is to basically be putting our heads in the sand. But this here in Providence, this is a waterfront community that is susceptible to extreme weather events and to the kinds of toxics and toxicants that exist on the industrial waterfront. Your struggle, regardless of whether you're Puerto Rican or not, is completely related, is relatable to what's happening in Puerto Rico, to what's happening in Miami, in Detroit, and throughout the country. And so there is much that you can do to support that and to basically harvest some of the best ideas that are coming from the climate justice movement and operationalize them. For the Department of Health and the agencies that are represented here, I think that, and I don't know you, I don't know what your relationship is with community. I'm assuming that if you invited somebody like me, that you must have leftist politics, because why else invite somebody like me? Because I'm certainly not going to stand here and call myself like a Hispanic or something like that, right? So I'm assuming good things about you is what I'm saying. And so, okay. So I think that your challenge is a little different. You're working in a system that was created for you. And it's a system that you have to dismantle. Literally, the civil rights movement was fought for this moment. We have been preparing for this moment all of our lives. And what that means is that if you're a person of color or you're a person of consciousness and you are in these institutions and these institutions are not working for the people that they are supposed to serve, your responsibility is to change them. And your responsibility is to change them immediately. And that means taking risks. And these folks can only take those risks if people on the ground support them. But those risks must be taken. They must be taken in government, they must be taken in city agencies, and they must be taken on the street. If you are not doing that, if you're not stepping into this fully, understanding that the things you love and treasure the most are literally vulnerable right now, and that we are in the midst of an administration that literally wants us dead, then I don't know what life you're living, because what is happening in Puerto Rico is genocide. And it feels very intentional. And that word, you know, my husband told me not to use that word. He said the minute you use that word, you will be dismissed. And I thought, well, you know, if 1/3 of the island's women were sterilized back in the day, if chemicals and all kinds of toxic things were tested on my people for generations, if they decided that they were going to leave Puerto Ricans there to die, if they are basically relocating people and they're not rebuilding, if they're letting children in Puerto Rico drink water with E. coli in it, if they are not testing air quality or water, what do you call that but genocide? And so that is what it is. And so that is happening to 3.5 million citizens. And for those of you who want citizenship, and you have been sort of hating on us a little bit, I gotta tell you, being a second-class citizen is not that cool. Because when you are a citizen, and you are a citizen of color, it is a whole different other thing, you know? So I'm just saying that, because Puerto Ricans are citizens. And so people ask me often, well, why do you think this is happening in Puerto Rico? And I said, could this possibly be happening in Arizona or Utah or, you know, Iowa? I don't think so. I don't think so. And we know, right? We saw what happened recently with the murders of all those children. We see how the opioid addictions are being treated. All of a sudden, when you're talking about other folks, all of a sudden lives are more important when you're not talking about people of color. And so if you're someone who is committed to anti-racism and to building community, to checking your privilege, to challenging systems, this is the moment. This is the moment that you step up and you let people know, estoy presente, and I got you. I got your back. Because honestly, what's at stake is our lives. This is not any moment like any other. When I was a kid, it was the civil rights movement. And I benefited from the civil rights movement. I owe my education. I owe everything to the Black community. And I want to say something about that because people look at me and they see that I'm light-skinned and I'm like, you never know how we're going to show up. I didn't become Black because I heard about it in a spoken word thing, or I took a class. I grew up in Orisha traditions, and there were people who were Nigerian, people who were Brazilian, people who were Honduran, Cubans, Puerto Ricans, and we were celebrating our Blackness before it was trendy. And so I say that because when I was little, and I remember my mom told me, you may be light-skinned with green eyes, but you may have a relative in North Carolina. Never forget that. She taught me about the African diaspora, taught me about my indigenous, and that made me feel strong. It made me feel like I was part of a world community. It didn't make me feel like a minority. It made me feel like I had power. I was grounded in that. I grew up in that. I am my mother's most melanin child, I'm not going to lie. That's true. But it was something that I celebrated. And I say that because even when we talk about immigration rights, we write out the narrative of indigenous people and Black people in this country. And so it is important that even if we're talking about climate justice and climate change, and we're talking about building community power, that we recognize whose shoulders, whose backs we stand on, and that we recognize that there isn't anybody here who would have rights if it wasn't because black people died for it, if it wasn't because we need to recognize that every day, or we are not about it. And so when we talk about climate change, it's really easy to focus on reduction of carbon when people of color talk about the reduction of co-pollutants that are killing us, and basically talking about it in a silo without talking about who we are, how we show up in a space, how we exercise power or don't, how we compete with each other and take each other out, how we fail to see who brings a legacy of struggle into the room. And you have to recognize that if we are going to create a different response to a complex issue that is like no other, you are going to have to open your hearts and really embrace that difference is the thing that makes us strong, and that this country was built on it, and that some people came here in shackles. They were not, I was in Arizona just last week, and I had an Ethiopian driver who told me that everybody was an immigrant. And I said, but brother, we're an Indian country. And he said, no, they came here from somewhere. And I said, and some people came here in shackles. And he said, no, everybody came here from here something. And I decided not to fight with him. I had to let it go for my own wellness. But it reminded me of how much work we have to do with our own people. Because sometimes our own people want that dream, that American dream, that capitalist extractive dream, because they never had things. And suddenly they have an opportunity to have things. And now they are living in a time when having those things can actually result in them having nothing in the future. So all of that, whether it's culture, whether it's arts, whether it's poetry, whether it's whether it's dance, whether it's science and measuring levels of NOx, SOx, and PM 2.5, or figuring out where the storm surges are going to impact vulnerable communities and doing GIS mapping, whether it's making sure that our movement is intergenerational. And I have to say that because this society has a way of pitting generations against each other. And I don't know if you've noticed, but we've got young people and elders. Somehow all the adults disappeared, and everybody wants to be youth, even 30-year-olds. Let it go. And then you've got everybody who's an elder, even when we're not ready for that yet, right? Like, I feel like Yoda sometimes. So, people of African and indigenous ancestry have always been intergenerational, and we must be intergenerational. The table is not set unless everyone is at that table. And this is really important, that you figure out how to make it intergenerational. Don't minoritize young people. They have power, they have vision, and they know things that you don't know. And we need them. We absolutely need them, and they need us. We need each other if we're going to be powerful. My organization has people, young people on the board and on staff. Our climate justice organizer started with us when she was 12. She's 26 now. we grow leadership. It is our responsibility to do that and to do it in a meaningful way. The idea that you hold on to power, again, is an extractive, competitive, top-down, capitalist idea, and there is room for all of us. And all of us is what's necessary right now. If we are not leaderful, we will not be able to address climate change. So I invite you to go on our website and learn about Our Power PR NYC. I also want to say in closing that La Borinqueña, which is a Marvel comic book with DC, just came out. I have a chapter in that anthology of comic books. I feel totally cool. You know, there are people in that anthology like Rosario Dawson. I know I can't compete with her, but still I got a chapter in there. I'm so excited about it. I am so excited about La Borinqueña. And that anthology is for sale at Amazon.com. The pre-orders are going in today, and I don't do these plugs, but all the money is going to the front line in Puerto Rico. And so I would encourage you to buy that comic book because it came out today. So, de corazón de Acogán, H, Maferefun Ochun, gracias por tenerme aquí hoy. Gracias.